Go get him.
Cool. So I've jokingly referred to myself in the last few days as being bi-ethereal. And you know, also along that line, I think we've had we've had lots of ETC curious people recently. Now, if I'm bi-ethereal, I don't know what the hell you are, because you know you have visited many parts of the world, haven't you? So what kind of different blockchain projects have you been part of, been interested in? What kind of range have you traversed?
In the last 1 year, I've spoken now at a Bitcoin conference, a Bitcoin Cash conference, and Ethereum Classic, Dogecoin. Dogecoin's the best one, of course. DogeCon.
We have Doge Preacher here.
Doge Preacher, yes.
And Chelsea.
Cosmos.
Two of you, come up on stage,
Tezos.
both of you, come up. So sorry?
Cosmos, Polkadot, Tezos. I'm going to a Stellar conference for the first time next month. I don't know, I just love interoperability.
Just don't go to a Ripple one.
I've spoken at Ripple ones.
Okay.
Go to the Ripple ones too and bring your magic.
Don't go to a BSV one, for God's sake.
I have
That's
not been
the
to a
line.
BSV one. I have not been to a BSV one.
So yeah, I'd just like to introduce here Chelsea and Alex, who are long-time,
right?
Yes.
Okay.
long-time, you know, Vancouver crypto folk. You know, are sort of the heart and soul of Decontrol that many of you were perhaps at last night, and they were both basically the organisers of DogeCon, which happened here in Vancouver.
And we'll be happening again in 2020.
And Sonny attended.
People are so welcome.
Sonny attended. I gave one of the opening talks at, and yes, happening again this time next year. So if anyone would like to come back to this glorious city in 2020,
June 2020.
June.
Yeah.
We have a planned
Summer
month.
solstice. DogeCon Vancouver happens on the summer solstice every 2 years.
Yeah, keeping crypto weird is kind of the overall.
Memes. There will be a D&D game. Like it's gonna be pretty intense. So there will be information in the next couple months when we have our nonprofits EGM. But Sonny, your kind words about DogeCon on your thing gave us happy
So
years.
Alex is Doge Preacher.
And I do real weddings. If you want to get married on the blockchain, I am an ordained minister.
Yeah.
Is it on the
Government weddings, though. Only blockchain still weddings.
Love you, Bob. Love you too.
I love you too, man.
Okay. So,
Cool.
you know, love not hate.
Thank you. Oh, please. All right. Hey guys, my name is Sonny. So I don't, these are a bunch of like organizations that I kind of work with. I'm primarily work mostly on Cosmos, but also do a bunch of other stuff in the space. I used to work at Consensus for a while. I like to troll a little bit and create my own little fork projects. My most recent one was this project called Straight Edge. But you'll notice that I don't really have much to do with Ethereum Classic. There's nothing here that has anything to do with Ethereum Classic, except maybe at Consensus a little bit, where I used to troll Joe Lubin about it a lot. But but for some reason, I'm considered the Ethereum Classic guy in the Ethereum community, which I don't understand why. Mostly I just wear... Yeah, I basically just wear this t-shirt a lot, and then people think I'm like associated with Ethereum Classic. But the extent of my association is... I'll tell you a little bit of my story with Ethereum Classic. The bottom left logo is Blockchain at Berkeley. It's this org I created student org I created at Berkeley. We do a lot of like cool stuff. About 3 years ago now, I was interning. I was at a hackathon over the summer, and I was a huge Bitcoiner. That's all I knew, and I heard about this Ethereum thing, and so I told my friend hey, let's look into this thing. I heard you can build applications using it, and so we're like, okay, let's check it out. And so the first thing we do is we go on r/Ethereum, and we open the page, and this is kind of what we see. So I found out about Ethereum during the DAO attack. And so I opened up this page. So this is the search results, so searching DAO attack, but it looks something like this. And I was like, okay, I don't know what's going on. People are yelling about rollbacks and DAO attacks and something. So I'm like, okay, this community is crazy. I turned it off, didn't look at Ethereum again for like another 9 months. Then, at the IC3 event the following summer, I kind of started working on this thing called Peace. Back then it was called Peace Relay. Now it's called Peace Bridge. It was sort of like an initial attempt to try to do an Ethereum Classic bridge that you can send tokens over that. And also at that event at IC3, we had that famous, the first parity multisig bug where there was where money was being stolen. And so what I did at that IC3 event was, me and my friend Nate, we heard that, we were with the Ethereum Foundation at that event, and we heard that something was hacked. And so, they went off and did their own thing to solve it. So me and Nate, we tried to reverse engineer the attack. So we did. We wrote a script to exploit it. And we don't know what we were doing. We were just like, all right, let's just write this script and we'll figure out what to do with it later. Turns out by the time we finished, we learned that the attacker was a white hat, and so we decided not to run it. And then later that evening, I realized, oh, wait, what about Ethereum Classic? So then Dexaran and I spent that entire night running the script on Ethereum Classic to make sure there was no vulnerable contracts. Turns out there weren't. Anyways, OK, so now on to the main point of my talk. So I don't know where I saw this quote. I've been trying to find it for the last few, I saw this quote maybe a week or two ago. If anyone knows where this is from, let me know. But basically, what it was saying was a war on the scale of 2 years is won by economics. A war on the scale of 20 years is won by technology. And a war or a civilizational conflict on the scale of 200 years is won by ideology. And, this may make sense for war, but I think with the internet and the digital world, maybe we have to compress these time scales a little bit. So how about, let's say, a digital war or a meme war on the scale of 2 months is won by economics. A digital war on the scale of 2 years is won by technology. And a digital war on the scale of 2 decades is won by ideology. So, obviously, I buy the Ethereum Classic ideology, which is why, after learning about the history of the DAO attack, I'm like, oh, OK, I really think that was the right way to do it. But clearly, it's losing the war against Ethereum. And because at the end of the day, ideology, I believe, is just a way of inspiring people. But, the Ethereum Foundation clearly won the war in economics. They're just way better funded and have the resources to win that war. But now we're in stage 2. And I think what we should be focused, we're on the scale of this digital war has been going on for over 2 years now. And I think it's time to start focusing heavily on the technology. And I think the Ethereum community is really destroying the Ethereum Classic on this front. Just the tooling is way better. And we're getting way better. I think in the last year, we've gotten way better. We're finally caught up to the opcodes with Atlantis. We have things like Ethernode, which kind of helps us get that user experience that Infura gave. There's more MetaMask stuff. And so I think the next thing that we need to do, though, is, Ethereum's big thing is this ETH 2.0 and this move towards scalability with sharding and then proof of stake. And so I think, Ethereum Classic should be looking towards these things as well, but in a more conservative way. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the current roadmap towards ETH 2.0, and I think this is something where Ethereum Classic has the opportunity to really step up and basically provide a better roadmap, a more conservative roadmap that might be able to help it win in this technological conflict. So before we talk about ETH Classic 2.0, I'll give a brief summary of how the progress towards ETH 2.0 for people who may not be familiar with it. So what we have here is basically phase 1, which is this main chain proof of work, the current Ethereum chain. And then they create this thing called the beacon chain, which provides proof of stake. And there's nothing really on this beacon chain in phase 1, but it's to get proof of stake going. Then in phase 2, they start to add these shard chains, where you can move tokens between these different shards. Or you can't move, well, yeah, you have these different shards. The validators are validating these different shards. But there's still nothing on these shards yet. Finally, in phase 3, which might be years away, we start to provide an execution engine where we can actually start running an EVM or a WebAssembly system or some sort of execution framework on these shards. And finally in phase 4 will we finally start to get some sort of cross-chain communication where you can actually send transactions and data between shards. And so essentially, my big worry about this is this seems backwards to me. I think that what Ethereum really needs right now is the scalability, really quick. One thing to note as well is there's this the part that worries me the most is this one-way staking. Like what happens in phase 1 is you have to do a one-way burn, which just seems crazy to me, where you have to go ahead and burn your ETH, and you'll get this new token I'll call it Beacon ETH, because it's not really, if you don't have the ability to convert back to normal ETH, I'm hesitant to call it the same token. And so if you try to move it back, you're not allowed to. And you have to burn 32 ETH just to be able to participate in phase 1, which is not a trivial amount of money. And so this is really worrisome for me. So I love proof of stake. I've spent the last 2.5 years of my life working on proof of stake on Cosmos and stuff. And I think proof of stake is definitely the future. But I think there are some open questions that still have yet to be resolved. It's still a very experimental technology. We don't know the decentralization aspects of it. We don't know how resistant it is to cartelization. What kind of barriers of entries are there compared to proof of work? The neutrality is one that I'm actually personally really interested in because, I think there's an issue where proof of work is just seen as more neutral, which makes it easier for people to want to develop on a proof of work platform than proof of stake, because there's this inherent notion or feeling that people get that when they're developing on a proof of stake platform, they're kind of like part of someone else's empire or something, while a proof of work system is just seen as more neutral. Side point, when it comes to neutrality, what I would really like to see is Ethereum Classic and Ethereum remove the need for ETH or ETC as the native fee token. You should be able to pay fees in any token you want, but that's a side point. We can get into that discussion another time. So yeah, but really, all of these are things that I think are solvable. But really, at the end of the key, the biggest problem with proof of stake right now is it is highly experimental. And when it comes to Ethereum, I just do not feel comfortable shifting a $30 billion network to this highly experimental technology. And I want to see a more conservative roadmap towards getting there. And so this is why I kind of want to see, and I think the real issue came about in the last 1 year, where they decided to merge the Casper and the sharding projects into one system. And so I think this kind of muddled a lot of the research that was going on, where these really should be treated as two different problems. But because they kind of got merged, it kind of got very complex. So my personal belief is that I would prefer to see a more of a focus on the sharding aspect and the scalability, and then proof of stake can come over time. Because, yeah. And so why is sharding important? One, it's important from the scalability standpoint. But two, it's also important from what I call the maker dilemma. I can give a brief summary of what the maker dilemma is. I think having everything on one chain fundamentally creates a governance issue, and I think this is best exemplified by the Maker project, or MakerDAO. So I think the relationship between Ethereum and MakerDAO is parasitic in both ways. Here's how it's parasitic in the Ethereum to Maker way. Basically, as a user of DAI, you are only getting the security of MKR. Your operational base layer is secured by Ether, but the security of your token is actually secured by MKR. And as an attacker, if I wanted to break the system, I wouldn't go attack ETH. I would attack MKR because it's the cheaper coin, market cap, and it's easier to attack. So I'm getting the security of MKR, but I'm paying for the security of ETH by requiring all my transaction fees are denominated in ETH, and I'm paying it just doesn't make sense. I'm overpaying for security. Now, how is it parasitic in the other direction? In the other direction, what happens is, let's say that there's a contentious hard fork in Ethereum. Let's say it's because of ProgPow, or Parity decides to go get their ETH back, or one of many, many, many reasons. When the Ethereum Classic hard fork happened, there weren't enough large-scale dApps to really have much of a say, and it really came down to more community members and the Ethereum Foundation and many other entities. But today, I think the most important group of individuals who would decide which fork of Ethereum would be successful is not the Ethereum Foundation, but rather the Maker DAO holders. Because when there is a fork, and Rune Christensen and all 5 of the other Maker MKR holders decide that, oh, we just don't want to, we want to stop running the oracles on one side of the fork, the die on that side of the fork just falls apart because the prices aren't correct or whatnot, and the entire DeFi narrative on that side of the fork falls apart. And I think that by putting everything on one chain, you basically give a lot of governance control to some entities on decisions that maybe they shouldn't have a say in. Like, why should MKR token holders decide which fork, whether the one with the parity refund or without the parity refund, should win? That just seems wrong to me. And so I think putting everything on one chain causes these weird governance capture situations. So that's my pitch of, and I think side chains and sharding help solve that in quite a bit of a way. You can watch some of my talks on about Cosmos of why that works. But yeah, so let's go on to why my preferred progress for how to get towards ETC 2.0. So, what I would like to see first is, so today we have our proof of work Ethereum Classic main chain. It has an EVM on it. You have smart contracts. And I would like to see, step one is let's work on side chains. These side chains, let's focus them on being proof of stake. So you stake on the Ethereum Classic main chain, and that gives you voting power on the side chain, and we can use a consensus protocol like Tendermint, or Tendermint's the one I'm most familiar with, but there's many other consensus protocols that could work as well. And we allow people, we focus on the two-way bridge. I think that's like step one. I don't know why that, in what right mind, like that wouldn't be step one. We need the ability for people to basically move their ETC back and forth from the side chains to the main chain. Then, assuming that these are all EVMs, we can use things like the POA networks, Token Bridge, and whatnot. While if you don't want them to be EVMs, if you want them to be a chain built with the Cosmos SDK or parity substrate or Yele, going to shell IBC because, I got to do that a little bit. So Cosmos, we have this protocol called IBC, and so that's a really great protocol. It's a generalized sidechain protocol that allows you to kind of do token transfers and data transfers between chains that don't have to share the same framework. It doesn't have to be EVM to EVM. It's supposed to be a really well-designed general framework. But yeah, so I think really instead of these sidechains being EVMs, I would really prefer them to be application-specific blockchains. There's many reasons I prefer application-specific blockchains. I think smart contracting should be used for contracting, just like what it sounds like, things that are very specialized, need high customizability, short-term use. But I think dApps should be on their own application-specific blockchains. It reduces the attack surface. You get, most of the bugs today are because of weird edge cases in the EVM. While if you could write your application-specific blockchain in a native programming language like Go or Rust, you can actually reduce a lot of the attack surface. You get way more efficiency gains, and you get to fine-tune to optimize for your application. So yeah, and we can use. So we have these. Proof-of-stake side chains connected to the Ethereum main chain. We already see this actually happening quite a bit on Ethereum already. We have many projects who are working on side chains. But then I think the next step then is, let's run this for a while, let's really test proof of stake. I think that there's no reason to test proof of stake on the main chain. We can start testing proof of stake on these side chains. We wait some time, and if things work well, then we can remove the I don't know if you can see, I had the little, on the EVM thing, there's it's plugged in. Let's remove that. So now, let's stop the deployment of new contracts on the root chain. We say, okay, all the contracts that are already on the root chain, they can stay there. Things that are not, you have to move them off on. If you want to deploy new contracts, you have to start deploying them onto these side chains or shards. Wait some more time. We can say, okay, you know what, now, we're really comfortable with the EVM on these side chains. The contracts have been going really well. Now we can maybe start migrating stuff off, and we provide a path for people to migrate their contracts off into the side chains and shards. And now we can wait a long more time, and when we finally feel comfortable about it, and we really believe that proof of stake seems to work, then we can finally go ahead and switch the main chain into proof of stake. And I think this, and for this, I'm thinking like a time frame of like 5 to 10 years when we really get to, I think proof of stake needs to go through the same like tribulations that like proof of work went to get to the belief that we have in it today. And so this is sort of my humble proposal for an ETC 2.0. And so, yeah, thank you.
So just to say, we're only going to take 2 questions here because we're running a very long way behind.
Sure. Any questions?
Also, we're going to go straight through the break. We're just carrying straight on.
Cool. Any questions? Yeah. Yes.
On your Cosmos,
Yes.
relationship, to Microsoft, Cosmos DB.
Sorry, what?
Is there any relationship?
Oh, to Cosmos DB? No, not at all. Yeah, Cosmos DB is just completely. It's a cool open source project, but yeah, there's no really good relationship there.
Thank you.
Anything else? Oh, yeah.
How much more performance do we get if we say we exchange IBC for a new protocol that requires both sides to be EVM? How much do things get better?
I don't think that much. I don't think they actually improve that much. Largely because most of the systems today that assume EVM on both sides are kind of doing it over the smart contracting layer. So, for example, the POA token bridge, right? That requires these off-chain validators to send transactions onto the chain that basically say, like, okay, I witnessed this event happening on this other EVM chain. The idea of IBC is let's not do this at the smart contract layer. Let's build this into the base protocol of a chain. And so I think it would actually be more efficient because you don't have to run this stuff on the EVM, which is relatively inefficient than doing it at the base layer. Yeah. But the problem is you do lose out obviously on, you need to build this into the base layer and it's not as permissionless to add it in. But I think once we come up with good standards around IBC as a protocol, then it'll be easier to. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Cool. Thank you, Sunny. Thank you. So, yes, straight on to Zachary's talk.